Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another recording of Magic the Gathering Arena. So we got an update. It was quite a large update. In fact, it installed a new version of C++, so I kind of wonder, and I don't know if there's really even a credits function here to tell if they stopped using Unity. So what we're going to do is turn up the audio here and see if they fix that bug. They did. Okay, good. So I can now turn off the incredibly annoying idle music that loops over and over again. And we don't have to listen to that. Now we can come over here and adjust the audio back to something. Let's put it right about there. Let's put that right about there. And let's put that right about there. Well, we'll even go right about there. And we'll see how that works. So, thank goodness that was an incredibly annoying run there of terrible lack of ability to really listen to the audio. Reroll this. Let's go to the store and look at the daily deals. I'm quite confused now because they've come out with this new expansion, which is Ikari, which is not Core 2021, and you can buy what looks like a master pass for this, and you can buy a whole bunch of bundles. We are back to them wanting you to spend at least $100 on Magic Arena, and we're not going to do that. So, have they abandoned the core series? Is that the idea? Or what? Because you can't buy these newest cards yet. And let's just run through the thing here. Maybe I misunderstood this. There's Galaxian, then Rivals of Galaxian, then Dominaria, then Core 2019. Then there was Ravnica Allegiance, War of the Spark, and then Core 2020. So I guess maybe I was off, because we have Throne of Eldraine here, Theros, and I guess we're going to get Akora, then we're going to get Core 2021, which, alright. But there is also some weirdness there that this is a tie-in with Godzilla, and I think one of the Godzilla cards has a Japanese word that's close to Corona. Let's see if we can look here. Apparently we can't get any of these cards yet for another 15 days, so we still have a little bit of time. So yeah, I was clearly not paying enough attention. With this new expansion, it does kind of imply that there's not a big interest in going back to the Gatewatch and the main story that was being told. Now that there's been literally 3 expansions that don't seem to really be focused on this, unless the Gatewatch really does show up, and I barely even understand what the Gatewatch is. So, did not mean to click that. Let's see. How do we cancel that and go to the idle screen? Sorry about that. Alright, so you can't even click on it to get more details. Okay, well, that is weird. That is weird. Yeah. Let's see. We have Black Seed on the chat already saying, what is this madness? This is Magic the Gathering Arena. We're trying to get into it. And start playing it. So, yeah. Godzilla cards. We have 26 days until this April ends and 12 days until this Mastery set ends, and I guess we're gonna have a bunch of Godzilla cards. It's gonna be really weird to try and figure out what those cards would really play like, or if they'd have any kind of long-term playability in something like Modern or Pioneer. I was listening to a podcast just yesterday talking about how a lot of these gameplay styles, such as Modern and Pioneer, even if there are new cards in Standard that get shifted into Modern and Pioneer, they are kind of highly unlikely to be top tier cards enough that they would actually change the meta or make it anything. Let's see. Black Seed asks, did you watch the MTG stream yesterday? They gave away a bunch of info about the new cards and mechanics. Nope, I definitely didn't. If that does bring us to the accountability section of this video, I basically did nothing yesterday. I've been lying in bed because I hurt my back, and that's all I literally did. But on a bigger point, I would not want to spend more time on Magic and watch somebody else play Magic and stream and talk about Magic. I'd rather be able to just be a more laid back Magic player who can just jump into that audio's too loud, who can just jump into the game and let's just go ahead and turn everything down a little bit. I would want to be just kind of a lazy fan that could jump into Arena and get the general idea of what the cards do right now. When I was covering Hearthstone, you were able to, before the expansions come out, for some small amount of time, go over here and do something like this, and you then would be able to see the cards from the newest expansion and read them there. I would make long videos looking at every single card, trying to figure it out, and that was heavily informative and helpful. The fact that that's not available in Magic Arena, at least at the moment, is a detriment, certainly, because that is really the only opportunity that I'm going to try and learn all the new cards, and Magic brings out so many new cards compared to even to a Hearthstone expansion that there's just so many cards that you really just fall off a cliff, and I lose attention span. Like, my attention span's getting shorter and shorter, frankly. So it gets really hard, and I guess maybe if you had been playing since Alpha, you might have some familiarity with cards and be able to generally figure things out. But even then, a new expansion almost always brings in at least one or two new concepts, one gameplay mechanics or key phrases that you would have to learn. They're doing this Friday Night Magic at home, and they said you can build with any card in Standard, whether it's in your collection or not, which in theory would mean that I could go and copy like a top tier meta deck if I wanted to, but it would be an incredibly wasteful amount of time. So it's easier for me just to take my best deck that I have right now and just play. You only need to win wins. This is the second week in which they've done the Friday Night Magic digitally, and if your local game store is still in business, they might be able to give you a sleeve. The problem that I determined after the first Friday Night Magic was they really need a list of people in chat. Just put 20 people together, have them play each other, and bring up a shared chat. So, like, just automatically have 20 people added to your friends list, being allowed to chat, and then removed from the friends list after the fact. Or removed in make like a second category. Have friends and then have people you've met type thing. Because that's where I feel like, as somebody who hasn't really ever played Friday Night Magic, I feel like that's probably where you are going to try to have something digitally close to Friday Night Magic, is you're going to want to have that interaction, that atmosphere, the idea of some camaraderie, the idea of some people playing together. By the way, I just realized that there's like a Tuesday and Wednesday night drafts and maybe a Saturday, so there's like 4 or 5 different nights specifically implied to be playing a different type of Magic. So if you are really, really big into playing paper Magic, you could be at your local game store 4 to 5 days out of the week, it seems like. Which, that seems a little crazy. But, and frankly, it just sounds a little expensive. Let's see. Black Seed says, I've been playing since Alpha. This would be an opportunity to build something fun and what you want to try. But here's the problem with being allowed to play and build any card you want. I haven't been playing but for a month, and so while I did briefly play Ice Age, I don't remember any of those cards in Ice Age. And I certainly don't really know any cards before Throne of Eldraine, particularly. So, what they're saying here, particularly for Magic Arena, which is just the cards that go back to Galaxian, because that's when Magic Arena first started. They're saying here that I would have to have, at some point, for some reason, been motivated to go and look at old cards that I couldn't play in Standard, even though Magic Arena completely forces you to play Standard over everything else. They have literally no interest in you really playing any other mode, not Historic, not Pioneer, not traditional. But at some point they would have assumed that I would have just gotten curious and looked at those potentially 500 plus cards and figured out which ones of those I really wanted to play. That's not realistically going to have happened for most players. They're going to be too busy trying to get those 15 daily wins that get you rewards, or too busy just trying to build a current Standard playable deck with the current expansions.
Let's find a place where you belong.
And being able to play any Standard card in Magic Arena is totally different from being able to play any card that was Standard at one time, because that would have been pretty much any card deck. And I would say, it seems to me, I'm no expert here, but it does seem to me that there are definitely champion Magic the Gathering card players that seem to set the desire and taste and demand for cards way more than anybody else. So if there's a champion that plays, say, one card, let's just say Black Lotus, since that's the go-to reference, of course people are going to see that champion won with Black Lotus, and people are going to want Black Lotus. If there was a card that was better than Black Lotus and no champion ever won with it, that card would very possibly get overlooked if it was very complicated and never get played. I don't feel like Magic in particular has as many silly game mechanics as some of the Hearthstone sets and decks could have been. Like, you could make some really crazy, thematically silly decks in Hearthstone, and you could still have some fun or do something interesting with it. Whereas the boring, useless cards in Magic are typically just a 2/2 bear equivalent, and that's it. Or like a creature with no effects. Like, you would think for as long as Magic has been around, there's really no reason that they should be making new creatures with no effects at all. That those should just be reprints of the same cards, or not be printed at all.
Those who walk beside me.
It's the difference between, I would say, a card game that sells expansions but you get all the cards, and a collectible card game. We've seen in the past decade or two a lot more card games selling the other way, unlike Magic, which is a collectible card game, where you buy a base set of cards and you're guaranteed to have all the cards that you could play or ever need, and then you go and buy an expansion and you get every card in that expansion. I would say Magic at this point should, when they're selling expansions, they should be selling like $200 to $300 boxes that give you every card in that expansion. And even $200 and $300 is still a lot of money to ask 4 times a year, but it's actually a way better scenario than blind pack openings, which could definitely cost you more. Let's see, let's go back to the chat. Let's see. Blackseed said, so to catch up, the core 2020 or better is standard. So the standards start on the core sets. I thought they ended on the core sets, but okay, I was wrong about that. The sets you can buy packs for are in red are not standard, and the Friday Night Magic at home is standard only. It usually is. I thought this week they said you could play any card that were... we'll probably lose here and go back and check that. But yeah, my main point there is there's not a big difference between the standard cards and the non-standard cards in Magic Arena compared to the amount of non-standard cards in Paper Magic, which would include everything going back to Alpha. He said, Blackseed Dinley said, Black Lotus was possibly was made possible by a first turn win. Do you know this combo? I'm trying to see how this Black Lotus and the train of thoughts relates to standard today. My point there was, I was just picking a card that is well known and popular. It was made popular, I imagine, by somebody being seen playing the strategy of that first turn win. Had nobody ever played Black Lotus, it wouldn't have been as it wouldn't be known or popular. This is kind of circular logic, certainly, but my point is, it's because of the pros, the champions back in the day, particularly before we had YouTube. It's because of those pros playing the cards that they made the taste and decided what hundreds, if not thousands, of other players are going to try and play. And that's what you see when you look at the websites that just give you the top meta decks in in card games like Magic, and those top meta decks just get copied and pasted, and people just go and buy the cards to make those top meta decks. Blackseed then said there were 40 some sets of cards out there. We don't need to care about them as a new player. Stick with 2020 in standard. Then moving forward, you will learn what you need to know. That's pretty much what I'm doing.
Friendship feeds the soul.
But it would also be nice to probably have a few of those good cards reprinted. And it is, while it is Magic's desire to make people play standard, there is also an argument that standard is the most expensive of the play styles, because every expansion you're having to buy more cards, whereas if you have a traditional or pioneer deck that you really like, you can play that for years potentially without having to change your deck by much and still have fun with it because it isn't artificially phased out. So what does this say? This would build a deck with any in standard. Oh, it is in standard. Well, also the idea of any really in that case just means that that you can play any card in standard. Well, it still really doesn't change too much, because if I was to go over here and go not collected, and then Theros, Throne of Eldraine, and Core 2020, I did that backwards, and that would still mean I would have to waste some extra time. Remember, the goal also today is to get 15 daily wins and cover the video game news, which is also non-negotiable. So I would have to kind of go through all of these cards, of which I don't have too many that I'm missing, and read all of these and figure it out, and that's just it. And Field of Dead is banned anyways. So yeah, I could change my deck slightly, but I don't think it's really worth the effort, because I think a lot of this really just comes down to, do you get randomly put up against somebody who knows what they're doing and is gonna have a good draw, or you're gonna get put up against somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing and you're gonna lose. Like, I had a bad draw last time. I should have mulliganed. Now I have a decent draw, and so there's a decent chance I'll win. And you kind of know it, at least for the decks I've been building, on the draw. Like, if you have to mulligan 2 or 3 times, you probably lost, and you might as well just concede. And I've seen Magic players certainly do that quite a lot. And if you get a great hand and don't have to mulligan at all, then you probably are going to win, depending on your luck with the opponent. Let's see. Alright. Trying to catch up here on the chat. Flexseed said, like cycling is coming back as an old retired mechanic that we're going to use again. Mechanic meaning ability, like Planeswalker or Flashback. I haven't heard of Flashback, I've heard of Flash. Cards that you don't own, he says. Black Sea says, I'm at work tonight, I can't wait to get home. I don't know that this was a feature of the game for Fridays. Yep, they've been doing it for 2 weeks now. This is the 2nd week. There we go. Quick victory. Great. That is what I love. I love quick victories. I love cheap and easy victories. Now, what were the rewards guaranteed? Were they going to be at least rare? Or, let's see. How can you tell if something's a rare or a common or uncommon card? I don't know if they mention that on the cards, actually. No, they don't. So this could be a common for all I know, but it is new. But then it might be just new because it's in one of the expansions that I don't have a lot of cards. Let's see. Yeah, card will be at least rare. Alright, so it is at least rare. It wouldn't hurt if they put a little like Twitch or YouTube video in the corner for Friday Night Magic and really just change the way the interface looks. Something that would show other people playing, or you could get really fancy and have like the video playing in the background. You'd have to get artsy with that, certainly, to make it look right, but if instead of a play mat being shown here, you saw people in the background actually playing Magic via a live feed, that would be interesting. You got to really bend over backwards to try to make this, in my opinion, feel like Friday Night Magic. Otherwise, it really is just a event, just a standard event that, like any other event, and that's not what they're trying to replace there. It really is the difference between seeing Disney World on TV and being at Disney World. There's a mild difference there. And so the only thing I could really recommend for people is bring up Discord, which they could have easily done that without changing their program at all. They could have said, we're going to have a Friday Night Magic Discord, and we're going to set up one for every local area and local game shop, and have people on that Discord and chat and get together. I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't a decent number of people that already have Discords set up. But yeah. Now, if this was just a standard event and it had nothing to do with Friday Night Magic, and it was you could play any card in standard, that's nice, that's interesting, but how is that? That really should just be a practice game, really. Like, you should be able to make a practice deck at any point with any card from any expansion so that you can practice. And there certainly are other ways in which people have played that way, and it's the equivalent of playing with proxies for cards you don't have. So they should pretty much one day every week, like on a Saturday or Sunday, they should have proxy events that just says, we're going to give you a bunch of cards that we're going to let you play any card you want. They do have some events, but sometimes they cost gold, where you can play cards you don't have out of pre-built decks. But then the rewards for doing those events often are not worth the time it takes to play the deck. There is still a major problem with Magic where if the opponent knows what they're doing and you know what you're doing, you can get into these long, prolonged experiences. The game would do better with a shorter timer, or just, I don't know, maybe you put a 10-minute timer on the game and just whoever has the most life points at the end of that 10 minutes wins type idea, something along that line. Because it is super annoying to play for 40 minutes and then lose. Let's see. Oh, Black Seed. The icon in the middle of the card shows the set, then the color denotes the rarity. Black is common, silver is uncommon, gold is rare, and red orange is mythic. Like Bowl of Citadel is rare, Spinning Wheel is uncommon. Let's see. Good. So is it the color of the icon? So this is uncommon, and of course this would be so yeah, black is common, so this is a common card. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I wish the game had told me that in the tutorial mode. That would have been really easy to put like one of those YouTube thumbnail red X's around it and tell me that that was it. Go to the deck builder, he says. We'll look at the deck builder here after this game. So yeah, that is a very useful bit of information, because that does kind of show me that I'm mostly playing uncommon cards. That being said, I don't know if you can just pick the mythic 60 cards that are mythic rares and be guaranteed a victory. Like, of the cards I've been allowed to own and play, this is, I guess, a rare. I wouldn't think that just the most rare cards are going to synergize and play in the strategy. These cards do somewhat synergize. Unfortunately, playing with Witch's Oven and Cauldron's Familiar can win quite a lot. It just takes a lot of focus and attention. It's an annoying play mechanic that often Magic Arena decides to not work in the way it should. And so it will pop up a box going, "Are you sure?" when sometimes it won't pop up a box saying, "Are you sure?" because their programming seems to be oddly programmed. See, right there, you use Witch's Oven, the sacrifices, it doesn't say, "Are you sure?" You play that, and it doesn't say, "Are you sure?" But later on in the game, almost certainly it will pop up a box asking if I'm sure. So, alright, now we've covered the things. Blackseed says, sort the cards, it will say, and where it says common, uncommon, rare, mythic, it shows the cards I'm referring to. Yeah, I think I figured that out. Let's start covering the video game news, since, yeah, I don't have anything else to talk about. Steam has a Xbox Game Studio sale on, which includes a decent number of companies that they've bought or invested in. So it's not just Halo or Ages of Empire, but also Sea of Thieves is coming to Steam, and Double Fine games like Psychonauts 2 is coming, or We Happy Few was, I guess, funded somewhat by them, or the Grim Fandango Double Fine remaster. So there's some small collection there of games of interest, and there's not a lot of games that came out, or a lot of things to talk about certainly this week, and I imagine as we keep on going, we won't be seeing a lot of announcements or anything, and I don't feel like there's a lot of newsworthy reasons to harp on articles like the whole Randy Pitchford / Gearbox not paying the bonuses that they were promising. Story was a story we talked about on Wednesday, so while it would feel like emotionally good to be rude about that and mention it again, there's not any new news there, so it's not It's not professional just to bring something up over and over again. And that's what you see the mainstream video game media do all the time. It's just like, hey, let's bring up this story again and again. And particularly in Randy Pitchford's case, you can just go down the long path of negative stories and negative press that has been said about him that I assume are all true, but you can go all the way back to alien colonial marines and such if you want, and it's just beating a dead horse at that point. So I won't be really covering that story, even though I kind of just covered that story. There's Rogue Legacy 2 has been announced, and we'll probably have an article on that. I am a little surprised because that felt like a game that wasn't likely to... we'll sacrifice this, that way we have a flying creature to block with. Yeah, I wasn't really expecting a Rogue Legacy 2 to ever come out. I kind of question if there's much there. Let's go ahead and just sacrifice this one. Put this back on the field. Wish you could program that action so it would just always do that. Because that's at the end of each of an opponent's phase. That's the thing I want to do. All right, we're in a bad position because this has flying and double strike and haste, meaning that it's gonna wreck me regardless. Yeah, so it is questionable in my mind if people are going to really want to go back and play Rogue Legacy 2 as much as they played Rogue Legacy 1. But they certainly did put enough of a break there. I'm looking at this phrase cycling, and just looking at it, it seems like it's a lot like being able to exile a card and then bring it back, or being able to put a card in the graveyard and then have it escape for free, which escape was the mechanic that was added in Throne of Eldraine, I think. So, yeah. I don't know if you could really do too much to Magic to add a new feature that's amazingly crazy. My suggestions, my standard suggestion. Alright, see, here's what I'm talking about as far as them programming it weirdly. It does seem to trigger just a different way in which it works after a certain number of times, which totally doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really even matter that I'm doing this, because if he has double strike, he's gonna do enough to kill me anyways. Alright. Alright, let's go to the deck builder. Edit deck. And then sort, you say. How does one sort? What did these piles mean? These are the costs, right? So these are 1 mana cards, these are 2 mana cards, these are 3 mana cards. This is 4, this jumps to then 6. And these are land cards. How do you sort here by rarity? Yeah, let's look at the chat. Let's see. It says go to the deck builder, sort the cards, and it's where it says common and uncommon. Did you just mean up here, where it says common, uncommon, rare, and mythic rare? Yeah. But if I sort the cards here, that doesn't really sort the deck. If I click this, it doesn't say rares versus mythic rares. See, they don't even really seem to care about that at all. There's no adjust options, no. Learn more. Change the deck layout. I mean, I guess you can just sort your cards this way if you wanted. And drag them around. But clearly they have a default sort. Let's see if that actually does anything. If we come back and edit this deck now. Nah, it just set it right back to the way it was. So yeah, I don't see a way to actually sort in this by rarity. But I can see now that I recognize that colors are different, with the exception of murder. I'm playing uncommon cards mostly, with Taste of Death and Bullet Citadel being rare cards, and no mythic wild cards at all. If I was to look mythic rare in black that we've collected, we've got some planeswalkers and things, but I'd have to really figure out which of these cards I'd actually want to play with my strategy. Which my strategy is playing Bullet Citadel and a bunch of cheap cards anyways, so that probably wouldn't work too well. Not that this is particularly working too well. I would love to be able to just jump into a game and have a 80-90% chance of winning. Unfortunately, anytime you're playing a collectible card game, that's not how they're designed. They're designed so that you win 50% of the time, or maybe slightly above that, and that's it. Because they want the other player to have a chance of winning also. And while it might be nice if I could go drop down to the lowest tier and just smurf and beat on a bunch of new players in Magic Arena, that isn't very kind to the new players, and that doesn't help the community and the player base in any way. And so the ranking system does work, at least to that extent. Black Seed says, cycling, pay the cost, card goes into the graveyard, and you draw a card. So it doesn't come back into the hand? Oh, okay. There's been plenty of cards in the past that say discard a card, then draw a card. Cycling seems to be a lesser form of that, because you can't choose what card you're going to discard. You have to discard the card that actually says cycling on it. But if you are trying to make a blue mill deck and have either you or your opponent run out of cards, there might be something to that idea. Alright, first game we have on Steam is called Valkyrie Connect. It's tagged as a free-to-play JRPG, and by the looks of it, it looks like it is a cell phone gacha game that's been ported. I've seen plenty of these gacha games like hero collection games. The art when in cutscenes looks fine, and on the menu looks fine, but when you start to look at what the actual gameplay fighting mechanic is going to be, it's going to be this, which isn't amazingly good looking. But it is free to play, but it then does have in-app options, in-app purchases. It's English, French, Italian, German, Spain, Spanish, and a whole bunch of other languages. I would assume that this is either a Japanese or Korean origin game. They're calling it a JRPG. That tends to imply it's from Japan. And while I do play one gacha game on my phone, it's mostly popular to me because it is an idle game, and I'm testing out another idle game, but I'm gonna eventually get bored of that and get rid of it. So yeah, I'm specifically looking for things that would play themselves, not things that would require require me to put attention into it. I suspect we'll start to see a lot more cell phone games try to make it to Steam. Ideally, I would like Steam to have kind of its own cell phone category, like mobile games side-loaded on the Android phones through the Steam app would be nice. I generally would like that to be more of a secondary reward. So if you buy a company's AAA published game and they have a cell phone tie-in game to that, they give you the cell phone tie-in game for free. But right now it seems like it is very much being the exact opposite of that. I should have read this card and sacrificed it to get a food token, and I didn't. The witch's oven takes way too much micromanagement for me. This guy clearly is going to be playing a red deck where he's going to be an aggro spell dealer, damage dealer. Let's see, how many do we have here? When they're tapped, it's hard to count how many you have. So I think I might have 5 plus this, which would be 6. But I might only have 4. So yeah, can't do anything here. We'll just have to go ahead and end the turn. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see. 1 damage to each opponent. Counter target spell, deal 2 damage to spell's controller. Seriously? Alright, well, then we'll just do this. And we'll see how well they can handle that. See, Black Seed said a while ago, correct the card that says cycling, but there are added abilities that can go with it, like pay cycling. When you cycle, target creature gets X or deals X damage, or there are secondaries. I don't believe I've ever seen anybody actually type out a stammer before. That's interesting. But I'm certainly not one to throw stones in glass houses as far as talking incorrectly. Yep. Next we have a game that came out called Feed the Horse Bear, which looks probably like a low effort kind of like party game. Looks kind of like a kind of Unity attempt at something. There is something to this that needs to be applauded, at least. I have not seen anybody make a dual control game where they're carrying food to a horse slash bear. This is 99 cents. Is it one player? Yeah, so you're controlling both characters. If that was like a little Mario Party game, that would be perfectly fine. It would just need better graphics, which of course you would get in Mario Party. But as a separate experience, it certainly is nowhere close to quality enough to be reasonable or a realistic offering. Even at that low price. Gamatsu has an article, Pro Yaku Spirits 2019-2020 season data update launches April 22nd. So apparently the Japanese baseball season has not been shut down yet. Or at least the Japanese baseball games are still going forward. Yep, and this looks like a nice looking baseball game simulator. Although, yeah, it'd be interesting to find out if half of the baseball games are just reskins of other baseball games for different regions. That would be the right way to do it, certainly. So we need to sacrifice this. Bring this back. So here comes the Gamble Bola Citadel. We have 16 health. We play this. Everything here costs life. And you can only play land like normal. So we can't get up to 10 yet, but we're up to 7. And so next turn we'll see if we can get 3 more cards on the field, hopefully one of them being Vindictive Vampire, to potentially do the 7 extra extra damage we need to do. Let's see. What is this gonna do? Sacrifice that creature, in exchange get a food token, which can be sacrificed later. Or I could eat it right now. Or I could use this to block that. Okay. 7. 3. This much. Do I potentially want to try and attack? No. So what I'm going to do is end this turn. And then we'll see if we can tap this guy. Probably not. We probably don't have enough. Yeah, we just have barely enough to tap this guy. But do I really want to do that? Not really. Let's instead activate this ability to gain health, which will buff this guy. What is this one gonna do? Alright, well, I'm gonna go ahead, since that does 2 damage, and play this once. And I can't tap a target creature. because I don't know why I can't actually. This should be able to add a mana, but apparently I need 5. I thought that said 3, but that is actually 5, isn't it? Right. Yep, and still lost. Okay, alright. Let's try something different. Clearly going up against people that can pick any cards or beating my deck. So let's try Force Might. We haven't played that in a while. It's not particularly a good deck or anything, but we'll give it a try. Meanwhile, we have a game on Steam called Lock and Load Digital, which looks like it is a board game that has been badly turned into a PC game. If I was to guess, it doesn't look very visually interesting. That is often the difficulty when converting a board game to PC, is you've got to basically make it look way nicer. This is early access, $2.99, English only with a third-party EULA. It's single player with cross-platform multiplayer, split-screen PvP, but no online multiplayer apparently. And it's from Lock and Load Publishing, which I guess might be better than having somebody like Asmodee Digital make it for you, because they tend not to do the greatest of jobs. Let's see. So let's go ahead and play that. Yeah, Lock and Load Tactical Digital, not making it to my follow list. Let's create a food token. And attack. Open Critic has an article here. The Last of Us 2 has been delayed until further notice. I believe also Marvel Iron Man has been delayed until further notice. These were 2 Sony exclusive titles that were in development. And you'll just have to figure out yourself how much of that you want to attribute to the coronavirus, and how much of that you want to attribute to them using the coronavirus as an excuse because they were in trouble. Last of Us has been delayed, I believe, once before at least, so they could just be using it as an excuse. Whereas Marvel Iron Man, I haven't heard any news about at all, so it may actually have been on the path to being released on time. Let's see. Magic has a blog here, where to find Ikra and C20 previews. These are probably a list of a whole bunch of Twitch streamers. They do promote a lot of partners, content creator partners, Magic does, but that they really fail to have a single location for them to go. Like, I don't want to have to click on each one of these people's links to Twitch or YouTube channels. Why not have everybody be on Twitch and then host on Twitch, since that's something you could do, and it's not very difficult to have people put out their content on YouTube, and then you have just a single Magic the Gathering Arena YouTube channel that would put out like announcement posts to say, hey, go here, click on the link in the description to check out this video that's coming. Just some kind of central hub. Alright, so we got another new card. And that's as much as I want to do as far as Friday Night Magic at home. Like, it still just does not really feel different nor particularly rewarding, even though it did give me 2 cards. And I got a 3rd card some other way. I think I got that from just doing the mastery set, which we're gonna probably make it up to rank 100 in the next 12 days, and maybe even 110. Now I need to play white and green cards. The historic popper contest, on the other hand, would give you cards for 500 gold, and I believe I did this once already. And potentially here, compared to the Friday Night Magic, while there was no entry fee, there's also not an opportunity in Friday Night Magic to make more gold than what you put in, although you would have to get 4 wins, and my performance is nowhere close to that. And then there's this Arena Cube Sealed, which an Arena Cube Sealed, I believe this might be the first time they've ever done this, and it must have been something that they were thinking about doing, because they have a bunch of card art here to show it off. So these are going to just be special arena packs. Is it possible that this is worth it? Well, the good news is I might as well give this a try, because getting 600 gems with 5 wins before you get 3 losses is probably the best offer they're going to do. And but here's the caveat. This event is phantom, a phrase I've never heard before. Cards in your sealed pool are not added to your collection. So you get to play this Arena Cube, but then you don't get to keep the cards, which probably is true if you were playing a cube in real life too. I doubt too many people are going to be happy with having a draft after building up a cube and then losing all those cards and having to repurchase them. But I don't know, maybe you can make some money that way too. So it's almost an interesting idea, but the fact that the cards are phantom, I think, kills the momentum on that idea. And then if we were to look at some of the other gameplay modes that they don't promote, I don't think that there's anything else here really worth mentioning or anything new, but I do want to check these every now and then just to make sure they haven't snuck in the new mode. But yeah, they really have no interest in anybody playing traditional particularly. So, standard ranked, no. We'll play this white deck, which isn't much of a white deck, and we'll see if we can get some more victories there. And then I need to double down my focus and cover the news, because I'm gonna be here for another 2 hours if not, and I don't want a ton of stuff left over. Can we make this work? I think we can. So Resident Evil 3, if you've heard of it, has come out on Steam. It's very positive on the rating. It's already on my wish list. It's $59.99. There's a Raccoon City bundle for $80 if you buy Resident Evil 2 Remaster and Resident Evil 3. They're not even trying to bundle you to buy some of the worser Resident Evil games. There's a whole bunch of languages supported. Third-party de novo is installed and third-party EULA is installed if that matters to you. And they are pushing the Resident Evil Resistance element too, and it seems like I don't think anybody is liking Resident Evil Resistance. And yes, there are rumors, and I think that's pretty much all they could ever really be until there's an actual announcement that they're working on a Resident Evil 4 remake. There was a fan project to remake Resident Evil 4. But even at that, I imagine if they were going to use this new level of graphics and this new engine, Resident Evil 4 would be a very, very different game from what it already is. And I think that probably is the right way to go with it, to kind of mostly abandon the look and the feel of the Resident Evil 4, 5, 6, and just say we're going to retell that story, but it's going to look different and it's going to play different and the level layout's going to be different, and it's just going to be a completely different experience. Whereas Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, I think, stayed somewhat truer to what the experience originally was. I think you should probably throw that out for the newer games, and that's pretty much all Capcom can do, other than just also make Resident Evil 8, which would be the other thing, is have that content be made and ready to go, and make sure Resident Evil 8 is really good. The danger here is that we're going to get these nice remasters of Resident Evil 2 and 3, and then Resident Evil 8 becomes one of the off games like Resident Evil 6 or like 5, and then we may have like 2 series of just off games that aren't that interesting. Let's just go ahead and attack here. But yeah, I'd love to play Resident Evil 2. I'd love to play Resident Evil 1 Remastered. Really, like, personally, I haven't ever been able to get Resident Evil 4 to run as smoothly as I would like it to run, so that I could cover it on my PC. I think there's Windows 10 micro stuttering issues still there. At least it seems to happen and then sometimes not happen. So I have covered 5 and 6, and so I'm perfectly suited to either cover 7, which would be fairly cheap, or cover The Evil Within 2, which I own and was gifted to me quite graciously by a fan, and I have not gotten around to playing it. So I should play The Evil Within 2, which is made by the somewhat creator of one of the creators of Resident Evil, one of the Resident Evil games. But yeah, I should then probably just play 7, then jump back to 2, and just play them in order of release. And then by the time I covered 7, 2, and 3, I probably would have done that over the course of 4 or 5 years. At my current rate of content creation in particular, as I've been slowing down more and more. Let's see. Think I've won here. And since you always need those 15 daily wins, taking a victory is always the right move. Although I should jump into ranked at some point and try to work my way up ranked. Let's get this daily quest done first, and then we'll play a little rank. Next, we have a game that came out on Steam called Stealth Master. This is an asset flip placement game. It seems like you design levels and then you're supposed to act stealthily, but every screenshot showing here does not show anything stealthy at all. So yeah, this is an asset flip low effort game for $9.99. Bunch of languages. Nothing more needs to be said about that. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Motion of the Heart, which looks like it is a horror visual novel, if I was to guess. And by the fact that you have 2 screenshots showing off blank backgrounds, now with 3 screenshots, that tells me this is probably a cheap Chinese visual novel, if I was to guess. 59 cents, English, Russian. Alright, it's a Russian. It's also tagged short. Also, this art style here does not really line up with the scale and the art style here or here. Let's see, discard a card. So yeah, Motion of the Heart has nothing impressive in it at all. And that's pretty much all the games that are going to come out for quite a while, I think. Alright. Get this on the field before he forces me to discard another card, because that is going to drive me crazy. He's playing a hand destruction deck. Next we have a game on Steam called The Curse of Ziggurat, or Zig-Oris. Looks like a platformer adventure game. Is it interesting enough that I want to play it? There's some effort put in here to kind of make it look good, but then there's a lot of darkness in the backgrounds, which leads to just kind of a dull, uninteresting color palette scene to scene. This is $5.09, English full audio. I don't think there's something here, because this kind of feels like a Metroidvania if you were going to try and make a Metroidvania that was way worse than the current offerings for Metroidvania clones. So yeah, that doesn't quite make it to up in quality. Gamatsu has an article, Mega Dimension Neptunia 7 for the Switch is coming to the West this summer. Switch version is currently available in Japan. So this is the Neptunia latest game in the Neptunia series. And it's a main... No, I don't think Mega Dimension is one of the main games in the series, but I honestly couldn't tell you, because there's Super Dimension, Hyper Dimension, and Mega Dimension Neptunia games. And then there are some definitely side stories like VVV Tunia, and there's far too many Neptunia games for their own good. Let's see, I don't think I'm gonna survive this one. But yeah, the Neptunia series still continuing to get more games as a JRPG series, and still being popular enough to be able to fund that. Alright, Scry. We don't need 2 of those. Gamatsu has the article, Rogue Legacy 2 announced for PC, first set of screenshots released. This looks like Rogue Legacy, this screenshot. We're seeing health, we're seeing magic, we're seeing maybe some extra abilities here. We're seeing an on-screen map, which was not, I think, in the first game. But this guy looks new, and then these guys look pretty common. And so I'm not really sure if there's anything new here. I wouldn't be surprised if it just has kind of like double the number of yeah, let's come back over here. I wouldn't be surprised if it has like double the number of character classes and some new enemies and some new bosses. Definitely would need new bosses. Here we can see in this screenshot they're making a Game of Thrones Iron Throne reference, which is really late to the party. And how do I get to the next image? Here we have a different character selection screen with some different abilities. I suppose I should be a little bit happier with some different options at the bottom, but not a lot being shown, certainly. It probably is smarter that they waited and made a full sequel to the game, even if it really is just going to be a slight mod to the original game, instead of what we've seen a lot of indie developers do, which is just constantly add more and more content. When you look at like how Shovel Knight developer has just made more and more updates to Shovel Knight, to probably his own detriment when he tries to make some other game or sell a sequel. I think people will be burned out on Shovel Knight. I think the same is probably true for things like Dead Cells. The Binding of Isaac 2 certainly as a series got a lot of updates, and a lot of those updates could have been more effective had they been sold. Some of the updates were sold, and a lot of the updates were sold as DLC to the base game, which makes a weird buying path if you try to own all of the Binding of Isaac games on Steam. But yeah, a lot of those updates certainly were free also. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Destructivator 2, which looks like it's an attempt at an old arcade game with elevators and ladders, with maybe a boss fight or two. But yeah, I guess maybe you'd call this a bullet hell side-scrolling shooter more than anything else. It's $5.39, English only, single player. I'm not really seeing anything here that would interest me too much. I don't know how you would sell me on a game like that might have been slightly interesting in the NES era, but now you're making a PC game in 2020 that looks like that. I kind of expect games to be more complicated than that, or more polished than that, at least. So we're never going to get this guy back. I was hoping I would get him returned to me. So, yep. Gamer Sutra has an article. Phil Spencer talks how Xbox teams are weathering remote work in the lead up to Series X. If you're interested in this blog, it's about 3 paragraphs. That really isn't going to affect average gamers too much, other than the fact that everybody is probably going to be a little bit slower, and everything's going to be a little bit more delayed. Now is the time to work on your backlog of games as much as possible. and feel sorry for the one person on the planet that doesn't have a backlog of video games, and actually wants to play video games. Wouldn't be surprised with all the self-isolating if there's a major increase in interest in just playing retro games, old ROMs. Particularly if the production of physical discs in consoles became stretched. We're not to that point yet, but it might be interesting. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Game Exchange keeps its stores open, gives staff bogus advice for COVID-19. I don't know Game Exchange. We've heard basically this exact same story from several companies, video game companies and otherwise. But Game Exchange chiefly maintains storefronts across the southeastern U.S. in Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and elsewhere. And also has several locations in Connecticut. Alright, well, I guess that's probably why I haven't heard of them. They're not like a major national retailer. But you can almost certainly assume that the same bits of information are getting said over and over again. It would be really hard, although I've had some crappy jobs where I was ready to walk off, and I'd pretty much be ready to walk off the floor and leave and quit on almost any instance. Like I am way past the point where I'm gonna put up with any BS at any job. But it would certainly be hard for most people to just say, you know what, I'm not coming in. I'm sick, or I'm afraid of, I'm self-isolating. That's probably the best way to phrase it. It's like, I'm self-isolating, I'm not coming in, fire me if you want, and hopefully trick them into firing you. But I don't think unemployment is going to care one bit if you job abandon, which usually doesn't qualify you for unemployment insurance, or if you get fired or laid off or furloughed or whatever they want to call it. The one thing you don't want to do right now is actually go to work. It's not healthy for the country, it's not healthy for you, it's not smart unless you're actually doing something essential, and working a video game store or retail store is definitely not in that category. And I'm sure bosses and people that run businesses who have been running, most businesses have been run badly, are now suffering because they don't have the insurance that they needed to ensure that they could not make income for a while. But yeah, those businesses, and frankly a lot of retail businesses, do deserve to die. It sucks on a larger scale that places like Amazon.com might just be completely taking over all retail, and there is never going to be any small business ever again. We've been saying that since like Walmart started to be a thing. But my suggestion is they should just probably nationalize Amazon.com and just have the government run it, give it that governmental monopoly, since it already is going to have a de facto monopoly anyways, and then all resources can be shipped through one distributor and one retail storefront. It's not unheard of, even in the United States, to have commissaries, government stores. You have them in, ironically, both military events and jails. So yeah, that's probably where it's gonna have to go. And there will be some small niche businesses that do pop up and still still exist, but a lot of the business concepts and business plans of used video games in particular were never going to make enough money, and anybody who thought about it for half a second would probably figure that out. Yeah, I don't think this is gonna win. Next we have a game on Steam called Proxy, which looks interesting. It's tagged sexual content. I don't know what that is about. It has 2 characters you're playing as, which is kind of night and day. You have Trent, who's a ranged fighter, and then Alicia, who's a melee fighter. And Alicia, in comparison by height, looks like she's potentially 16 if I'm generous, and by height I'd say he's in his 20s or 30s. And then it looks like it's a third-person perspective fighting game with 3 energy bars that have a little bit of polish to them. It's a weird-looking game, definitely. Looks like it's a shooting game. Is there a real game in it, or is this just a lot of pop flash? It feels almost like it's trying to be something like a Borderlands type beat 'em up, which that idea is intriguing, where you have more melee and more shooting, and a Borderlands not on a crazy Pandora like places. Well, this game is free. Is this a student project? See, game includes depiction of alcohol, tobacco, drug uses, prostitution. It's English full audio, single player. I think I gotta put this on the follow list. This looks very weird, and I've never heard of Last Call Games. I've never heard of VR Ventures LLC, but this is not a VR game. I feel like this probably is only 5 minutes long, though. It probably is just a tech demo. There's not really enough characters. It seems like it's score based. While I'm looking at the description, so they probably were thinking of having like 3 to 5 characters instead, and having a score based experience. But yeah, that is one of those rare games that we almost never see, where it looks visually good, but then the actual content is lacking. Usually when people make low effort games, they know it's a low effort game from the beginning, that they're not going to put the funding into it and try. Rarely do we see somebody who's actually trying to make a good game make it look good and then realize they can't put enough content, enough levels, enough enemies, enough characters, enough story, and yet they still put it out for free, because usually people either just abandon it completely at that point, or try to sell it, yeah, there's really a pretty wide valley between low effort games and games that are bad but finished, for lack of a better description. We've seen a few of them, certainly, though. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Dread Tides, which looks to me like it's a hex placement tabletop game simulator. And looks a little too polygonal, a little too asset flippy. It's early access, $14.39, English full audio. I don't see anything here that would interest me. I suppose I should mention I was playing Monument Valley 2, because they giving out a decent number of mobile games for free on Android, and I finished that, and I found it frankly uninteresting. I don't remember Monument Valley 1 at all. I know I played it, but I don't think that its MC Escher platforming was particularly interesting, and the sequel doesn't really change too much. It just kind of moves it forward in a generational way by having the character you're playing as in the first game be the mother of the character that you play as half the time in the second game, and then you play as the character from the first game the other half of the time. But there's kind of nothing there. It really is just too simplistic a game with not really any puzzles or challenges. The most difficult thing in Monument Valley 2 is finding the secret final achievement, which is just clicking on lizards in the last level, which I don't know why you would click on lizards in the last level. I guess that may have been the only instance of any kind of life in the entire game. That guy's dead. That sucks. Use pacifism on that guy, and then we can attack. Gamma Sutra has an article here. USC Games Expo swaps to virtual for the 2020 Student Game Showcase. So the University of Southern California, the annual student game exhibition is going all digital, like everything else. You can go to the website, I guess, and let's see if they've got actually a list of what games they're trying to show off. No, apparently the event hasn't happened yet. It happens May 12th, 4 p.m., streaming live. Okay. Seeing student projects is always interesting. It's not particularly useful or informative, but it's always interesting, at least, to see what one can do in potentially 4 years of a bachelor's degree, what one learns and what one can do with basically no funding compared to then getting hired and being a low-level programmer or developer in some way of games. Like the best example of that is Portal 1, where the team at DigiPen made a game called Vernacular Drop, and then Valve hired I think everybody on that team out of college and made Portal 1, and I think most of those people stayed around for Portal 2, and I don't know if any of those people or most of those people still work at Valve, but they certainly probably don't have too much to show off. Maybe they could say they worked on Half-Life Alyx. I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly the case, but before Half-Life Alyx, they might have worked on Artifact or Valve Labs or something like that. Alright. I'm gonna lose regardless. I have all these cards in the stack
I can't lose a fight.
Trying to deal 1 damage to him and gain 1 life for me, and they theoretically should work, but they really don't.
Stomping time.
Like, I would have to block with each of these characters to even begin to reduce the trample damage that they're gonna do. Have we gotten the daily quest done? There we go. So no longer do I need to play that deck. Let's play some ranked, and my current trajectory does not imply that I will win, but I should try it anyways. Game of Sutra has an article here. Activision scores a First Amendment victory in the Humvee trademark lawsuit. From what I understand, this might be precedent-setting case law, where they said that there's a historical and artistic value in Activision being allowed to depict a Humvee without having to pay a license to the developers of the Humvee, since that is the car that actually is being used by the military. Let's see. Here's the exact quote. While both parties have a general purpose of seeing products for profits, AM's purported purpose is far too abstract to argue reasonable confusion. Put simply, AM, that's not Activision, AM's purpose in using the mark to sell vehicles to militaries, while Activision's purpose is to create realistic simulating modern warfare video games for the purchase by consumers. So yeah, that's a different quote from the one I had heard, but what this potentially means is that we will see more companies willing to go to bat about having realistic cars in their racing games. Like if you're making a Formula 1 racing game now, you probably don't feel the need to go and then have to license out every single brand of car in a Formula racing game. Although Formula 1 is probably a bad example there. It would be more of a off-road street racing game that you would then feel fair to depict several different kinds of cars and models. Or the other issue that has come up many times is that gun manufacturers will demand licenses for depicting their guns in games, which those extra little bits of licenses run up the price of video games, and video games are not getting cheaper. They are getting more expensive. So yeah. And movies and TV in particular have been particularly bad about kowtowing to these licensing and branding. So you will have undoubtedly seen a lot of people using Apple products like MacBooks and things like that in TV and movies. That's because the Apple is literally paying the people or giving the props to those companies. And so if somebody wanted to depict a more realistic experience, you would see half Apple products, half like Google products, half MacBooks versus some of the other manufacturers of laptops. You'd see a lot more variety, and the art actually would be more realistic and interesting then, because it is kind of suspension of disbelief breaking when you see 20 people in an office all using $2,000+ MacBooks. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Animal Crossing Hong Kong players launch in-game protests. Yeah, the Hong Kong protests are still going on, I imagine. And I imagine a lot of people are now just covering their faces for several different reasons in Hong Kong. But yeah, it's still going on. Important to remember and not get distracted and just move on to the next thing. All kinds of bad things and other bits of news are happening. Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, has been kind of heavily promoting a lot of tweets and a lot of things like this Dolly Parton Good Night with Dolly event on YouTube, or Dolly Parton's going to read books. She's always been very pro-literacy, launching COVID-19 health info. Really another fine example like of her not really staying in her lane and focusing. Like on average before this whole coronavirus, she barely would tweet something once or maybe twice a month, and usually what she was promoting was just happy National Women's Day or Latino Day or something like that, some social justice warrior, identity politics type tweet. Meanwhile, she's really still not interested or doing anything to really fix YouTube too much. So yeah, she's still not the person that I think should be in charge. Like, at least when you look at some of the other people, like the guy who runs Facebook, the guy who runs Twitter, characters like that, they tend to mostly stay hidden from view and try to work on their products, and the products do get little updates and such. Also, I would say Twitter and Facebook probably are way better products than what YouTube is now, because YouTube has just done some meddling. On the other hand, I'm not sure I want Susan Wojcicki to be more active and interested in YouTube, because everything she proposes or does just makes it worse. So all I can really say is I'd like to see her move on. I'd like to see somebody else in charge, somebody with some real strong opinions in the opposite direction of the people in charge now, to balance things out. Some people that really care about the creators and about free speech as a concept in general. Moving on, we have a game called Sometimes Always Monsters, not to be confused with Always Sometimes Monsters. It's pretty cool. This is an RPG Maker story-rich game. I covered the original one and absolutely hated it. The RPG basically takes you through this story that is pretty much around just ranting about money and success financially. The original game also had some weird anti-union stuff to spiel too, out of nowhere, that didn't make a lot of sense. In the end, regardless of whether you like the story or not, it's still just an RPG Maker game with its own art style. It definitely didn't feel like it was a game where you actually could have succeeded very easily. And like the way they started the game, the prequel, you pretty much start off being shown that you're going to fail miserably and end up homeless, and within like the first 5 minutes you pretty much are homeless in the original game. So I can't really recommend it to anybody. It's just not an interesting enough experience. I'm playing ranked here, and this guy's playing for all he's got, but he is going to also be able to wreck me. This deck only wins if I get Bolas Citadel, and it desperately needs a backup plan. Because that just did like 13 damage, and so even if I got Bolas Citadel, wouldn't matter. It's probably got one too many swamps. Alright, well, I don't even know why I'm doing that. Let's just concede. Let's quit wasting our time. Back down. Did I have fun with that match? No, I lost. Yeah, if I was really seriously responding to those prompts, I probably would say negative every time, because honestly, a lot of times Magic is just not fun. You run into this problem of having to deal with your mana generation, your swamps, or your lands, which Hearthstone fixed that really nicely to the point where you don't have to deal with that. You run into a problem where there's a lot of hand destruction that happens in Magic compared to Hearthstone, and that can pretty much devastate an attempt to play your strategy. Ideally, you'd want to have both players be able to play their strategies only potentially slightly encumbered by the opponent, where Magic, if you're doing it right, you can completely wreck your opponent's strategy to the point where by the 4th or 5th turn they can see the writing on the wall and just concede immediately. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article here, Dig Up Them Bones and Dinosaur Fossil Hunter, coming later in 2020. I don't know if this is a game, really. Anytime I see a game that is based on doing somebody's job, even if it is a particularly niche job as fossil hunting, I don't know if this is something I'd want to do. It seems like it's almost like they took a small fraction of a museum simulator, and that whole video really showed that they were making presentations, not actually digging up the bones at all. I don't know if there's really a game there, or if you're just simulating somebody's job. Let's see. Gamma Sutra's blog here. Historians discuss Through the Darkest of Times, which looks like it's a cardboard cutout game of some sort. It's a World War II themed game. So this is really just an advertisement of a video. There's no even article here. Just being promoted. So check that out if you want, but I'm probably not that interested in it. Yeah, that was one victory, but we would need 2 or 3 of them in a row to start getting the pips back on the rank. If we got some quick disconnects, I'd be more than happy with that. Gamatsu has an article here. Skater XL launches in July. It's currently in early access on Steam. A potentially new skater game that potentially will be good, although take that with a huge grain of salt because there hasn't really been a good skater game in quite a while. Gamatsu has the same article here. Last of Us Part 2 and Marvel's Iron Man VR delayed until further notice. I had not heard anything about Iron Man VR. Let's see, put this. I swear this game has been released on Steam multiple times at this point. And I can't even really show it because it's tagged sexual content and nudity. So we'll just try and do this real quick. So this game, Prison Princess, which is marked as positive. Tag sexual content nudity is now available on sale. Maybe it had just been listed and then relisted and early accessed. It's $15.99, which is very high. Pure full Japanese audio, English only. I'm gonna put it on the fall list just to see, but it is also an adult game, so that's probably not making it to the wish list. And even if I did make it on the wish list, I probably wouldn't be able to cover it on my YouTube channel or any service that I'm aware of. Prison Princess is 2 anime girls in an adventure escape the room experience, and they run around solving simplistic adventure escape the room puzzles, and half the cutscenes show them in a lewd angle, showing their underwear and things like that. It's questionable how much gets shown, but the screenshots are particularly lewd, so I wouldn't be surprised if you get a couple of images of actual full nudity. When you compare, well, when I think of this game compared to, say, what was that other game that I did cover that was an adult game? Can't even remember the name, and the sequel's about to come out. Well, when I compare this adult game to other adult games in general, you want there to be a little bit more gameplay than a hidden and adventure escape the room simplistic experience, or you want it to just be a straight up visual novel, romance dating sim of some sort. But yeah, this gameplay is going to be probably a little simplistic and probably not worth $16. Moving on, we have TechRaptor saying Magic the Gathering Godzilla debut highlights new Ikora content. So, yeah. It's going to be really crazy to be playing Godzilla several months from now. But maybe Godzilla will be fairly rare, or a game you're not even going to really play. If Magic the Gathering is going to start going down the path of saying all science fiction exists in the Magic the Gathering universe, you're going to be in a weird position then also. If we started to see Mario, Pokemon, Ninja Turtles, things like that, something closer to like the Lego Dimensions game where it was just anything and everything that they could license was in the same universe, Magic would be really set on a different path compared to what they're doing now, which is mostly trying to tell a story that is sort of based in the Dungeons and Dragons realm. And even with this Godzilla creature being added, it does start to make the story feel less believable and less credible and less interesting, because it sounds like something a 2-year-old would have thought up, that Godzilla would just appear out of nowhere in a game. Alright, I've lost. Right. Let's see. Gamma Sutra has an article. Sony forms a $100 million global relief fund to help those affected by COVID-19. Yay. I guess we'll applaud that to see if it really pays. Although a lot of these announcements could literally never actually pay out or barely pay out to anybody. So how much good they actually will do can only really be determined later after the fact. And almost certainly a lot of money is going to be given to the wrong people and wasted. Speaking of a different card game, TechRaptor has an article here. Gwent, the Witcher card game, receives an all new progression system. I feel like this very well may have been the second or third progression system that they've added. Gwent also came to Android, so, but that was like a year and a half too late. I don't feel like there's anything that would sell people on playing Gwent right now. Like the problem is Gwent was on like iOS for a year extra, and it was on PC I think for several months before it was on iOS, and just now it's coming to Android, and so you just have these separated player bases for a collectible card game when you needed to get as many people playing Gwent as possible with the release of Witcher 3. Honestly, they should have been releasing the Gwent card game a year before The Witcher 3 came out. The only idea I think they could possibly do is take the general concepts that they learned from Gwent, put slightly different cards, art style on it to make it Cyberpunk 2077, and a slightly different gameplay style. So just change it up a little bit and make Gwent be your experiment game that then gets replaced with some kind of Cyberpunk 2077 card game, and try and relaunch it, have it on all the platforms again, have it come out a year before Cyberpunk 2077, which would be, frankly, you'd have to release it right now. And the game would need to play differently than Gwent, because it'd have to feel like they didn't just copy and paste Gwent, when really that would be exactly what I'm recommending they do, is just take every lesson they've learned from that and start over. And then it would have been a good idea, because the general concept that CD Projekt Red would have been able to make a collectible card game that competed would have been very unlikely anyways. So if they can make that actually work, then that would be quite the success. Now, there's nothing wrong with Gwent, it's just the advertisement and availability of it ruined it, and the competition ruined it. And we might see the exact same thing happen with the second dinner Marvel card game that I plan on playing when it comes out instead of Magic. Like we might find that even though it's a Marvel game, and even though it's made by Ben Brode, the guy who was in charge of Hearthstone for quite a while, it may just be that there's too much competition, and there's really only enough room in the world for the occasional Yu-Gi-Oh game and a Magic game and Hearthstone, and that might be all the oxygen in the room as far as that fandom has. Okay. This, and then this, I guess, is what we have to do. And then this and this. Gamatsu has an article here. Pixel art survival horror game Signalis announced for PC. It's a Eurasian Cold War retro tech sci-fi take on cosmic horror. Interesting description, to say the least. Do we have a bit of a trailer we can watch? I wouldn't really call this pixel art, and if anything, I would say this looks inspired by the black suits of the Gantz anime and manga. And it seems like it is kind of a horror game, wandering around a dark and creepy environment. Shooting a gun feels very Gantz-like. Looks like there's some puzzles. Skip around so we don't get any content IDs. Speaking of content IDs, Universal Music Group, which is owned by Warner Brothers, again going through their annual process of claiming content that they have already disputed and already won the disputes on. Like every year they just come back and claim it again. It's downright harassment at this point. Because they're hoping that you won't pay attention and that they can just get the money. And at this point, I'm not paying attention because I'm not in the YouTube Partner Program. I'm still trying to get up to 1,000 subscribers, which is a pretty much impossible task for my channel at least. I don't know about new channels. But yeah, there's kind of no point in even spending the time to dispute content IDs when I'm not going to get any ad revenue from it at all. In fact, I ran my income and I literally made $0.00 last year. And thank goodness somebody else is paying all my bills and helping me out, but it is really ridiculous. And if anything, because I'm taking care of a disabled family member that's effectively in exchange helping me there, but I've also been so inactive physically that has allowed for me to become very unhealthy, and that's how I've hurt my back and several other things. It's so I would recommend anybody that wants to be a YouTube content creator or do anything like that to make sure you exercise, or just in general make sure you exercise, make sure you're stretching, make sure you're not decreasing your level of activity but increasing it if at all possible, because a sedentary life will kill you whether you think so or not. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article, 80 Days developer reveals medieval narrative strategy titled Pendragon. Okay, this looks like this might be something. It might be like a mobile game. But we're starting to get some announcements for actual games. I guess E3 kind of, since it's not happening, we had to start seeing some of these announcements. Question will be how long before we start to go in different directions with announcements. Will they intentionally start to stop announcing games because they know they wouldn't be able to sell them as people are social isolating, or are they going to just try and announce them and push them out anyways? Or are they going to just start delaying games like crazy? I think we're going to see a pretty large switch between games that were in the works and are going to get announced and are going to have their release dates pushed back maybe a little bit or just get released anyways digitally, and then we're going to start seeing a lot of games that just say we're delayed indefinitely, which for the new consoles, if there's like a year worth of games that were delayed, there could be a really strong lineup of games that come out for the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, to the point where we might see oversaturation. If there's 20 AAA games available day one for the PS5, that's not as useful as you might think. Let's go ahead and do this. There we go. TechRaptor has an article here. Nintendo Switch 64GB cartridges are needed now for modern games. And even that might not be enough. Which I guess... I guess this probably means that games are just getting bigger. In fairness, like there was a major amount of download for Magic Arena. It took a good 10 to 20 minutes to download the entire update. But yeah, we've seen $100, 100 gig, 200, 300 gig even updates on some AAA games. So it's not surprising, even with smaller textures, lower resolutions that you might have on a Nintendo Switch game, it's no surprise that some of them are going to take more room up. It'll be interesting to see if those Mario games that are supposedly getting re-released on Switch end up taking more than 32 gigs. But I wouldn't be surprised if they don't, because they're probably relatively small. It is the textures, the audio, the video, things like that that are taking the majority of the space up. I'm just going to do no blocks here. And then go ahead and do this instead. So the article continues that publishers can select from 1 gigabyte, 2 gigabyte, 4 gigabyte, 8 gigabyte, 16 gigabytes, and 32 gigabytes. And I imagine, even though these cartridges are slightly larger, I imagine they are just really micro SD cards on the inside with just bigger connectors. And I'm fairly certain that the Switch does have a micro SD port on the bottom or somewhere else for save games, I think. But yeah, games like Borderlands, BioShock, XCOM 2 are relatively large games, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they want 64 gigabytes, although I wouldn't be surprised also if none of those games actually do go over 64 gigabytes without just a little bit of compression or some other. Alright, let's go ahead and attack here. Let's see, here's a quote here. The physical game contains a 16 gigabyte cartridge, including the opening acts of BioShock Remastered, BioShock 2 Remastered, and BioShock Infinite the Complete Edition. Later game contents and add-ons will need to be downloaded, so DLC has to be downloaded. XCOM is an 8 gigabyte cartridge. I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo charges a lot for those cartridges too. A download will be required for the rest of the total download side. The 8 gigabyte features 2 base game missions. A download is required for the rest of the total download size, which will not exceed 24 gigabytes. So it could have been 32 gigabytes anyways. A physical game of Borderlands Game of the Year Edition is 8 gigabytes with a 6.6 download required. For Borderlands 2 and Borderlands pre-sequel, a 35 gigabyte download is required. So only Borderlands actually goes over a 32 gigabyte so yeah, it is definitely an issue, but probably not as big of an issue as what they're making of it. Like, most games can pare themselves down to a lot smaller than 64 gigabytes. And it is important to mention that those discs aren't like interchangeable and reusable, so they are going to try and make the game cartridges be as small as possible to save money and save frustration. There you go. I've probably not been playing this right. And probably could have been closer to winning at this moment. Alright. So we go ahead and block that. Let's see, let's move on. We've got a lot to still do. A lot. Let's go ahead and attack here and attack here. See what he wants to do with that. I left myself wide open, didn't I? That was dumb. D-U-M-B. So all I can really do is this one move and then maybe block that. Gamatsu has an article here. A narrative turn-based strategy game called Pendragon has been announced for PC. I believe we already talked about this game. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure on this game, but we'll see. Let's try and cover all of the articles, because we may just have some games and I may just have to curate because we're going late. We are going late. Gamatsu has an article here. Survival adventure game Windbound announced for PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Looks like it's a boat crafting survival game, if I was to guess. It has a lot more visual polish than Minecraft, I'll give it that much. Although one has to kind of question, does that then limit the amount of things to do on this island, or is there actually an adventure or story here, and am I wrong about thinking that it is a that it is some kind of Minecraft game? Let's see, what's it tagged as? Let's see, uncover the secrets within, explore as far as I can see, live off the land, build your own perfect sea craft. Explore, adapt, and navigate the land in the Paris seas to stay alive. It might be not a bad idea in comparison to, say, Raft, where Raft is just staying on the ship and is a little bit monotone in the actions that occur, or any number of survival games where you're on an island and there really isn't anything to do on the island. Alright. Is there any way this works? I could sacrifice this and get 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11. Let's try this. We're going to try something crazy here. We're going to sacrifice this. And then resolve that and lose. I might have been able to win there. Maybe. But as you can probably tell, I'm not really doing great. Let's try this new deck. Let's just try something crazy and not play ranked and try and cover the news and then wrap up, and then I may have to just play off screen to get victories, as it seems to be the case every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday when I stream. Is that there's just way too much time and effort needed to play this. And undoubtedly this is why my pre-recorded video production is being affected, at least in a small part. There are a lot of other reasons, but when I have to spend an entire day playing just Hearthstone, or 3 days out of a week playing just Magic the Gathering Arena and not Hearthstone, although I did have to do the same for Hearthstone, it just takes up way too much time. Way too much time. And there's no great way to speed it up. This is where if I had an intern, I would just have them play Magic after I was done streaming. There we go. Here we have somebody who's calling themselves a reverend, which that's an interesting descriptor for Magic the Gathering. But whatever. I don't even know what this card does. I don't think it does anything too much. It's not even, yeah, it's not even that interesting of a card. I'm just playing it. Discard something we have 2 of. This has a 4/4, so we should play that first. Gamatsu has an article here. A magical school and town life simulator witch book reveals its new look. A look at the game's new isometric pixel art world. What did it look like before? This is apparently from Chucklefish. So before it looked like a flat pixel art thing, now they've twisted it at a 45-degree angle. One would hope that these were 3D renderings in the first place and they didn't redraw or decide to redraw everything. I think the isometric perspective probably does suit it, but then also in this screenshot there's just a lot more polish and detail than this, where this is very bland and boring looking. Still doesn't really tell us too much as far as which book. Is it coming out? Where is it coming out? What is it coming out on? Do we have anything here? It's just tagged as industrial. Apparently you have to play through the game's website. It's been quite a while since we've last seen a game that specifically had a website you had to go to play. Well, this is gonna win, surprisingly enough. Unless he does something crazy. Which maybe he'll do something crazy. Check Raptor has an article here. PlayStation reveals info for a bunch of games. Boundary. Let's see. What does Boundary look like? A space shooter type game. It's probably a space horror game of some sort. Like shooting bullets in space, A, would not work, and B, if did work, would be incredibly dangerous. Like you might as well be flicking rocks at each other for that's just about as dangerous as shooting bullets in space would be, and it would be just about as effective. See, next they have a game called Going Under from Team 17, which looks like a player versus player beat 'em up with some dialogue. It must be like a it's a comedic roguelike game where you're going through a bunch of failed tech startups and fighting. Interesting, but probably not amazingly great. John Wick Hex is already out on PC. It's coming to PlayStation. Biped. Here, let's come over here and play. Darn it, that was a discard op prompt. Magic Arena is still terrible about making it obvious that you're about to discard a card and not having you click a confirm button. Like some things they make you confirm, but the things they make you confirm are not the things you would want to have to confirm. Like I should be able to have to confirm that before I sacrifice a creature. Let's see. And I don't know if I won there because I was playing particularly well or have a particularly good deck, or if I just won because of something different. I suppose with these new cards coming in, we've also run into a problem. Each of these new decks here, with the exception of this one and this one, but this one, and this one, and this one, each of these were attempts at learning the new cards from Theros Beyond Death, and they kind of failed miserably in the entire release window of Theros Beyond Death. Like, I have not really learned any of these cards. I've not been able to really build a new deck from them. If anything, I should just go back to the default decks that the game gave me by default, and try and make small adjustments there. Perhaps that is an argument that Theros Beyond Death was not particularly a great expansion, but it also goes to show that because Magic Arena just demands so much of your time to actually be in this screen playing this game, whether it's because you're doing a draft or you're doing daily victories or you're trying to get up in ranked, there's just no extra time to actually look at the cards and go back and do deck building. It honestly makes it seem like Magic the Gathering is for people who have obsessive compulsive disorder, who are thinking about Magic 24/7, 365. And that's not a realistic way to design your game or have your game play out when you have, in a modern world like 2020, when you have so many other opportunities to play so many other kinds of games. In comparison, when even before a new expansion came out in Hearthstone, I knew what most of the cards did, and I knew the strategies that I thought would work and might be interesting to play. There's nothing like that in Magic at all. I still don't know any strategies that Theros Beyond Death really offered, or that were interesting enough that I wanted to play. I still don't know what most of the cards do, and I really won't ever know, because I'm just going to move on to the next expansion and see how much difference that adds to it. I would also say the expansions in Magic seem to be designed to kind of interact with each other a little bit more than Hearthstone's expansions. Hearthstone's expansions tended to be extremely isolated from each other and extremely designed to be played by themselves, which probably helps newer players more than people would think. Anyways, moving on, there was this biped game that had a trailer, which looks like it's a kids game where it's like co-op robots that are bipeds but don't have arms and they have to work together. Looks fine. Windbound we already had heard about. So yeah, four games coming to PlayStation. PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5. Take your pick. And that's probably all you can really take from that, isn't it? Let's see. I can't really play this to do that, so I'm gonna go ahead and just do no attacks and end the turn. TechRaptor has a review for Control the Foundation, the DLC for Control. I saw some people playing it. I didn't really enjoy Control, so it didn't seem like the Foundation DLC adds much to it. They gave it an 8.0. Most people liked Control a lot more than I did. Control the Foundation is just more Control. That's not a bad thing if you like Control, and it's not worth coming back if you didn't. That's, I think, exactly the kind of review I would give it to. Is like, it did look to me like it was just more Control. The pros are an interesting new story, great settings, some fantastic missions. It's more Control. The cons are it plays it a little too safe, new powers can only be used in specific locations, and it still has performance issues. Yeah. Why would I put the top card of your library in the graveyard to gain 1 health? I'd attack. Okay. So we've got a block. We'll do this to make that 4/4. And then we'll do this, and that should make that 9/9. And then that should leave him open for a while. Gamatsu has that satirical dungeon crawler Going Under is coming for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC in Q3 of 2020. Hack and slash away at employees and CEOs of tech startups. So yeah, slightly different story there compared to the PlayStation announcement. Just saying it was coming to the PlayStation because that's all they were interested in announcing. Alright. I could exile a card, but I don't think there's even a reason to do that. So this card would let me get rid of cards, but I don't know if there's a real reason for that. Let's go ahead and just attack with this. TechRaptor has an article here. Someday you'll return. which I assume is the name of a game, has been delayed due to COVID-19. I've never heard of this game, though, so it being delayed doesn't really matter much at all. It's another prime example, in my opinion, of just the long run of announcements that happens where games get announced 2 to 4 years early. And let's see. No, I can't do anything there. So yeah, that killed me. But yeah, far too many games to just get announced way too early, and they have no importance or relevance until they're way closer to being released or until they're out. Usually games don't even have any importance to me until they've been out for a while, so that people actually review them. Let's see. If I activate this ability, I would need 1 more land, then I could do this escape. I really didn't need to activate that ability anyways. Does that want to kill me? Just do no attacks this time. Let's see. Gamatsu has an article here. Enchanted Portals adds a PS4 version and the Kickstarter campaign launches soon. This is a game that I believe is a clone of the highly critically acclaimed game that I cannot remember the name of now. Mughead. Yeah, Mughead was the name of it. The difference here, I think, is not large, but I can't really complain about somebody doing another Cuphead. Yeah, not Mughead. Mugman was the second character in Cuphead. We should probably have 2 or 3 clones of these of that style of games, because that style of game was unique. If we start to see 4 or 5 of them come out in the same year, then people will be real complaining. I think the complaints then would be legitimate, that we're seeing too many Cuphead clones. It is also very possible, though, that this Enchanted Portals game is completely nothing but a scam, and no actual product will ever be available, or the product will be released and it will be particularly bad. And I do not recommend anybody support anything through Kickstarter or any of those crowdfunding forums. If Enchanted Portals really had a good idea, a publisher should be funding it, and in these trying times, I could see why maybe a publisher wouldn't be funding it, but otherwise it should have already been funded. And I honestly don't imagine that we're going to have a bunch of people that are nostalgic for old 1970s cartoons, 1960s cartoons, art styles, like Cuphead had. That's just kind of not realistic. Okay. So this guy will stay alive. And are any of these anything I could destroy with this? It would need to be an artifact or an enchantment. Moving on, OpenCritic has an article here. Sea of Thieves is heading to Steam. I think it's probably too little too late for Sea of Thieves. I don't think it ever really had a chance of succeeding greatly. And now at this point, it feels like they're just throwing good money after bad in an attempt to make it a success as a games as service product, and it just doesn't seem like that's ever going to really happen. Let's see. The LibRetro Core's progress report for April 2nd came out. Let's see if there's anything majorly new to announce here. Final Barn Neo has multiple latest updates. Blue MSX fixes not smooth scrolling in PAL. I mean, I'm gonna just read this while I play and see if there's anything here that's major worth mentioning. Because these are gonna be highly technical updates that will improve the emulating of old games on your PC, probably a lot more than trying to play it on like a RetroPie or something like that, where these versions and these updates very possibly aren't going to be ported for quite a while. The main one that you would want to be interested in is the Nintendo 64 emulation and the Dolphin emulator, which is the emulator of like Wii games and Switch games. I found out that the MAME emulations actually handle CDI, Philips CDI games, and I would have thought there would have been a special core specifically for Philips CDI, but apparently not. It's just the MAME emulator, which is arcade machine emulations in particular. Yeah, as I'm scrolling here, the NES emulator core FCE-UMM seems to have some major improvements on it, or a lot of things added to it, but also, in all fairness, that would be a major focus of getting updates, where a lot of these other emulators don't work for anything here. Like Pocket CDG is an MP3 karaoke audio player that I've never even heard of as a core. Yep. So yeah, I'll say check out that article if you're interested. Nothing hugely nothing hugely improved from the looks of it. TechRaptor has an article here. Square Enix broke Final Fantasy IX PC because of course. I'm not sure if this was the update that deleted the entire game or if this is something different. Let's see. According to a Reset Era user, the latest patch removed a massive amount of files from the game's directory. That might not be unintentional, though. So yeah. I'd heard similar story, but yeah, Square Enix does not seem like they're doing as good of a job as they should be, considering that they're Square Enix. Flying creature, dragon, creature, legendary creature. I'm gonna lose here. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article here. A 3D puzzle platformer, Tin and Kuna, announced for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Help Kuna save his buddy Tin and rebuild the Prime Orb. Let's see if we've got a trailer here to give us a better idea of what this is. Looks to me like it's probably a kid-friendly game of some sort. Adventure 3D platforming game with a lot of floating platformers and a kind of ball rolling mechanic. Almost like a spiritual successor to something like Glover. Interesting. I guess what I'll do is I'll leave up all the games that came out today and over the weekend for Monday, because Monday tends to be a bit slower. We'll do a little bit of curation. I'll do a little bit of curation over the weekend, but I have like 20 games to talk about that came out on Steam, and I don't want to sit here and talk about them. Like, we're not making great progress on Magic Arena. We're not making great progress on the news. I am, however, making some progress on my back being sore. Just every day it's getting a little bit better, and that's great, because the opposite direction would be awful. And it was certainly that case before. But it is kind of slow progress. Moving on, Gematsu has an article. Yomi wa Soku Hana launches June 11th for the Xbox One in Japan, and this winter for the PS4 and Switch. This looks like it is a dungeon crawler Japanese game of sorts. Not anything else to really show here. Wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't come to the West. Let's see. Keep on moving. Tech Raptor has an article here. Dead Age 2 brings the scares home June 2020. Which, okay. I don't know of a game called Dead Age 1 off the top of my head. It looks to me like it's kind of a tablet game. Not really not really that interesting of a looking game. It does have more visual polish than a cell phone game or a tablet game, but doesn't really look like a console game or a PC game. But it is coming out on Steam. It's coming out June 3rd, 2020. And that's going to be it for Magic the Gathering today. We did not make a lot of progress. Like 10 victories off screen in theory need to be done. If we look at the collection, we got one Core 20 card, and that's it. And let's see, profile wise, this ends, so I do need to play a ranked draft at some point, but I don't think I want to do Arena Cube sealed. And so then we would have to figure out, is there even a ranked draft that I could play? Theris Beyond Death. Like, I kind of don't want to play that either. I would rather play a ranked draft with the new expansion or with the old cards. So, yeah, I'm in a bad position to try and start doing ranked drafts to get back up to 3,000 gems after we buy the mastery for Ikra. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Ubisoft releases the final Rocksmith Remastered DLC, teases a future product. Okay. So, that is that. And then we don't need to. TechRaptor has a different title for the article here. Pandemic pushes back The Last of Us Part 2 launch yet again, and this time they say it's because of shipping difficulties, not the coronavirus per se, although those probably are the same thing. Gamma Sutra has an article here. There is a report that COVID-19 could delay Amazon's cloud-based gaming platform into 2021, I don't even know what Amazon's cloud-based gaming platform was going to be. Come to think of it, it's probably a Stadia competitor, but it's not like Stadia is really successful at the moment. Gamasutra has this kind of insulting blog, which often it is. They are, because they're written by game developers who have their own heads up their butts. Thumbs up getting the most out of player reviews. The point here is, in general, or the way it was phrased was to make reviewers better reviewers and blame the consumers of the game, basically, for giving your game bad reviews, which is kind of a ridiculous way of looking at things, instead of taking the feedback and adjusting your game appropriately if that feedback is in the majority and that is the direction you want to take your art if you're trying to make your art sell. If you don't care and you just want your game out the way you want it, then don't look at reviews at all. So here you have understand why people review games. You kind of don't need that information. That really is just trying to muddy the water a little bit. Like, if people review your games, listen to what they have to say. Don't try to think about why they're saying. That's really just second guessing people and not listening to their words and going, oh, you're just mad at me for this, you're just mad at me for that. Trust me, if people are mad at Firewatch because Firewatch threatened the DMCA on PewDiePie, which really happened, they will say in the reviews more often than not that they're mad at them for that in not so nice words. You don't need to understand why those people put those reviews there. You will be told. And even if someone is trying to be slightly sneaky about it and they're reviewing the game negatively because that action, the DMCA, encouraged them to go and write a negative review, if that negative review has anything that's factually accurate in it, you should still take it as their honest and true opinions, whether they had a motivation behind it or not. Next category is here. Learn how to appropriately encourage App Store, Google Play, and Steam reviews. There really doesn't need anybody to encourage game reviews. We see on App Store and Google Play games, so many of those games want you to give 5-star reviews and try to trick you into giving 5-star reviews and offer scams and gift cards and things that they're not supposed to do for positive reviews. It's something that shouldn't be encouraged. People should review the games if they want to review them, and they don't need to be encouraged by that. If anything, maybe Steam as a platform or Google Play or Apple, the App Store, should have its own encouragement system when you exit out of a game to say, hey, do you like this game or do you not like this game? And then that's about as much as should be doing. But here's the big insult one. Take the right steps to respond to and drive player reviews. Now, in all fairness, this article in general is something video game developers need to learn and hear, because a lot of video game developers respond badly, terribly, horribly to negative feedback or criticism. Phil Fish left the entire game industry based on some negative criticism. Several other people have too. But the idea of driving player reviews is generally saying, how do we brainwash the players to have our opinions and agree with us? And remember, most video game developers are California social justice warriors who are big into groupthink. All of Gamasutra and their side company, sister company GDC, are game developers who are big into groupthink. They get on Discords, they talk to each other, they control control how the narrative quite a bit. And that's pretty much as I want to rant about as far as this article, since it doesn't really have any relevancy to me as a critic. But certainly I would be unhappy as a video game critic to feel or find that somebody had tried to understand why I reviewed games more than what I say out loud, try to find some underlying reasons, which is what I assume this is implying, or to encourage me to review games when I will criticize and review the games I want to actually play in the first place, and that's the only encouragement you need. And if I want to play a game and not review it, I don't want any encouragement. And I definitely don't want somebody to take the right steps to respond specifically to my criticism other than improving their game or improving their sequel or just ignoring me if I'm in the minority or they don't care. And I definitely don't want somebody to try and to Jedi mind trick me into having opinions the same way. If anything, I feel like I probably have been Jedi mind tricked quite a bit by mainstream video game journalists who have convinced me to play a lot of games that once I got around to actually playing weren't as good as they were hyped up to be. And so now I'm very careful about making sure I'm really interested in the game, or I'm getting reviews from random general people on Steam reviewing a game instead of somebody like Giant Bomb doing a quick look on a game. Next, TechRaptor has an article, Levi's delays a Super Mario collection due to COVID-19. I did not know Levi's was making any kind of Super Mario pants. Apparently they were. First I've heard of it. These look hideous, in all fairness, so they probably should think about it. Like, this leather jacket with pouches is not terrible. It's probably too much going on there, when just like a Mario on the lapel or above the pocket would have been fine, but you don't need a coin on your sleeve and a princess on your thing. But these pants are just horrible. That is terrible. Gamasutra has an article here, how Rogue Legacy handles tutorials without being boring, but take note this is from 2014 and they're just republishing it because Rogue Legacy 2 has been announced. And Rogue Legacy did have a pretty decent tutorial section. It wasn't terrible because you did the basic movements in seeing the beginning cutscene or interacting with the beginning section. TechRaptor has an article here, Power Wash Simulator demo lets you purge the unclean, which I've never seen a power wash gun look like this. There was that game, Cleaning Simulator. that kind of never, what was it called? Viscera Cleanup Detail or something? Or Viscera Cleanup Simulator. That was pretty popular for about a year or so amongst YouTubers, but it never really went anywhere beyond that. And yep, again, you are basically doing somebody's job and not really a actual job or actual game that would be entertaining. Next, we have a Gematsu article, Gmode archives features phone title ports announced for Switch. I have no idea what Gmode archives is, though. It seems to be a collection of old games, from the looks of it. Old Japanese games that probably would never be ported over to the West. Yeah. These feel like old games that would have been on a phone called the G mode, which very possibly that phone wasn't called the G mode in the West, or didn't come out in the West in the first place. But back in the old days when few people were playing games or even had cell phones, let alone playing games on them. Gamma Sutra has an article here with Half-Life Alyx out. Valve shifts focus to its hammer level editor. Valve released its feature-length VR game, and let's see. Apparently, what is this? Hammer, which might end up being non-Valve developed. There's only taste of the Source 2 development tools. Was originally planned to release alongside Half-Life Alyx. So they're still kind of working on Source 2, but now they're calling it a part of it Hammer as a Hammer level editor, and Source 2 really is still not in any way releasable. Like they really have dropped the ball and should just have jumped over to Unity, I guess. I mean, they can't really jump to Unreal, can they? Not with the Epic Game Store competing against them. And that brings me to the Humble Bundle. And yes, there is about 20 games left over. And there's no new Humble Bundles. So then I'll go back to my Twitter feed. And let's see if there's anything new here to announce. Game Closure is hiring a back-end engineer. I'm just going to read that article. IGN announces a Summer of Gaming digital event for early June. Let's see. There's a lot of people talking about not Harvest Moon. What is it called? The Nintendo Harvest Moon clone game that I can't even remember the name. I think it's called Animal something. I'm having a bad day with remembering names, certainly. And they wouldn't call it Animal Farm. Yeah, still scrolling down my Twitter feed. Pokemon Go Spring Event 2020 focuses on solo play next week. Yeah, I think most people will just be playing Resident Evil 3, and we did get that one game of worth mention. And so that's probably what most people will be playing for the next week or so. And by the looks of it, there aren't even any new tweets or any bits of information for the nearly 3 hours that we've been streaming. Well, that's going to be it for this stream. I'll have to struggle off screen to get 10 victories, or at least 5 victories to get experience. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.